not higher percentage than I thought it would be, but it took a few years of arguing back and forth. Of that, $117 million has been reimbursed to the county at this point. Nearly $68 million remains in various stages of FEMA approval, and of that, about $50 million is in the very final stages of review, so it's on the cusp of being reimbursed to us. So the near obligation, there's three major projects there. Food, which is pending large project notification, and that's when it goes to our congressional delegation to notify them that one of their districts will be getting funding from FEMA. That's $17.5 million, and I'm just rounding numbers here. That is normally the last step. However, FEMA has added a manual review obligation step into its process. This is completely new to us, so we don't really know exactly how long it's going to take. After all of the automated processes are done and every single one of the probably 17 steps are done, now someone manually goes through it as a last step to make sure that it's in line with executive orders and other such directives that they have. We've been told by FEMA they expect that to take less than 30 days. So it's not dramatically impactful, but we have yet to see because there's no precedent for this. Our second project there is operating expenses and PPE for about $26.4 million. FEMA is short-staffed at the steps that they're at, which is at the Environmental and Historical Preservation Review. So their published target for this is 14 days. However, it's been with them since January 16th. So we are seeing delays, not necessarily delays in them issuing the payment, but just the process itself is taking significantly longer at some of the steps. And then our third project is more operating expenses and PPE just for a different time period. That's for nearly $6 million. That project is in a quality assurance review, which is the final review after the Consolidated Resource Center review, which is really the last step of the review. But then it has to go back, like I said, through that manual obligation. Two projects are in determination memo or in the appeal process, so we get a determination memo once a project has been decided upon. The determination memo either says you've been funded completely for what you've asked for, you haven't been funded entirely for what you asked for, or there's some split there, and it gives us some explanation. We appeal each one of those. So right now, there's a relatively small amount, $38,000 for personnel support costs is being appealed. And then our school health personnel, they denied $1.4 million in overtime cost of the $3.1 million that we submitted. So we are appealing that as well. And then there's one final project that's going through project development, and that's because FEMA's requested some additional contract documents. And that is for our non-congregate sheltering, which is a complicated, almost as complicated as food was, just because it's differentiating between congregate versus non-congregate sheltering. So they've asked for a lot more supporting documentation than we normally give. That's the remaining $14 million that brings you up to that $68 million. So some developments for you. We are always working very closely with FEMA. Not only our project team, but also leadership has been engaged at this point at the Region 3 and the headquarters level. We're also working with our congressional delegation who've been able to cut through some of the roadblocks that we've hit. We remain in uncertain and volatile times with FEMA and these processes where FEMA does not always know exactly what's going on, that they're subject to the same rumor mill that we are hearing. FEMA has put a pause on obligating funds, including all grants. That includes public assistance. We have not seen that impact our process. So as I said, there's these 17 steps in the process. We have not seen that slow down the process at all. There's been no pause at any one of those processes. And our consultant has advised, because they have overwatch over many, many jurisdictions, that since the administration has taken office, they have continued to see other jurisdictions receive obligations. So as far as we're concerned, it's business as usual. It may be a little bit slower, but that's what we're seeing elsewhere in the country. They have added several steps, like I said, so the process does take a little bit longer. And the manual review, like I said, it is promised to take less than 30 days, but they're really under no obligation to honor their promise to us, but that's where we're at. So that's pretty much where we're at this point. I know that's a long answer to your question, but I do want to give you guys a snapshot of the entirety of where we're at right now, and why it's important for us to continue to chase these funds, because we are right on the cusp of getting a significant amount of money at this point.
That was a terrific summary. I very much appreciate you walking through that, and I know you answered all my questions that I had prepared today by walking through that overview. I'll just see if my colleagues have anything. Yeah, Councilmember Lukey.
Absolutely.
Sure. So of there's 218 million total that you submitted for. 117's already been paid, 185 were approved, 68 remains.
Right.
It means there was 33 that was deemed not eligible for reimbursement. Do we know what those were? Like, did they fit into one or more buckets of
most of them,
problems?
honestly, most of them were food provisions,
Okay.
where the county could not prove, because we lean forward into our social services, and we do a very good job. I think we're all very proud of that. They could not prove that it was attributable only to COVID that we were providing this food.
Okay.
And they had a very salient point there that we tried, but nonetheless, they could prove that we were making those expenses prior to COVID as well.
Gotcha. And then in terms of the FEMA funds, are any of those coming through the Department of Homeland Security that goes sort of over to FEMA, then FEMA to MDEM, MDEM to you?
So they all come through the Department of Homeland Security.
Right. And
Then
so,
to FEMA, then to MDEM, then
Right.
to us. So that is the process, correct?
and my next question,
Which I may not know the answer to.
okay. Department of Homeland Security notified the state that they are auditing their grants to the state, and they were freezing it.
Right.
Right. And I know that, of course, at MDEM, about 85% of the folks who work for this,
87%.
yeah, are paid for. Their salaries, they're like trying to make payroll for the state right now, while Homeland Security has frozen all of Maryland's grants. Is a huge challenge, and of course, then that affects.
Yes, which I was going to say that.
So that's what I wanted you to. Yeah. So what's the? Have you heard when the anticipated unfreezing may occur? I mean, respecting that we are in some really weird times, and how is that impacting? Again, you mentioned like borrowing from the security grant thing in order to, because you've got to work within the confines of how our money is structured inside each department within each agency. How is this affecting you and the folks who are working under you at OEMHS?
So separate and apart from this.
Yeah, separate and apart from this.
We're in the same bucket. Those preparedness grants that fund the 87% of folks at MDEM.
Sorry, I didn't mean to discount those two.
No.
I got my number wrong.
A significant portion.
Yeah.
I say that because we are not in dire straits to that level. Nonetheless, we have 21 full-time employees, 10 of whom are still grant funded.
Right.
What you will see in our budget request coming this year is that we are requesting that several come off of those grant funds, because the work we do, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of the council and the executive, is a little too important to be on the shaky ground at this point.
Correct.
So we're trying to look forward. We just saw that the continuing resolution yesterday that was released does fund those preparedness grants at the same 2024 levels, which again were a 10% cut already.
Right.
So we were hoping they'd be restored this year. But again, that's assuming that the continuing resolution even makes it.
Right.
Anywhere, especially as is. So we will feel the same pain, because all of those same grants that they are sourcing from at the state level eventually make it to us. Now, there are two main sources that we get our funds from. One's the state and one's D.C. D.C. does things a little bit differently, where they front load all of the money into their budget, and they are usually, they're pretty lucrative in the cash flows that they have. They've assured us that they will be able to honor all of our grant funds that have been issued so far. So there'd be no risk of rescinding those.
No clawback of
Right.
anything that's already been
The
awarded.
state obviously is in a little bit of a different situation, and they have not said they would claw anything back, to be clear.
Right.
But they haven't openly said we're going to be able to obligate everything that you all are anticipating in the next few fiscal years that have already been issued.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to take the opportunity to ask those questions.
I appreciate it because
Since we'd had a robust discussion about the overall functionality and how money comes in, goes out, and moves, and why we have to come here and do these things repeatedly, because that's the mechanism by which it works. But that
And it will be interesting.
we're under a lot of stress. You're under a lot of stress.
Absolutely. And council member, to be fair, it'll be interesting to see, because I say unprecedented, but every time one of these things is unprecedented.
Yeah,
Every time
yeah.
we think we get a
I know.
precedent,
I know.
next time has some nuance that makes it a little bit more unprecedented.
Yeah.
So this pause is on preparedness grants, which fund, again, those 87% of people, and then, nearly half of the people
your staff,
in
yeah.
OEMHS.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how it affects this public assistance grant, because that's always been subject to audit. But in theory, the audit they're doing for this is much different than what they're doing for the preparedness grants. Whereas the preparedness grants are pushed through as an allocation to states, and then you submit an investment justification. So you already have the money in hand. It's not an application. There's calculus that goes behind exactly how much, and then later it's audited. This front loads what in theory is the audit with those 17 approval steps.
Right.
And we're trying to avoid, and that's where you notice, they noticed food, for instance.
Right.
Well, if you did it in a preparedness grant, they wouldn't notice that food for years later, and then we'd have to de-obligate, in other words, reimburse them for those funds.
Right.
So we're hopeful that it doesn't impact this funding, which is significant, and we certainly want this to keep flowing, but it does introduce the uncertainty of when the money flows into the state when they are in relatively dire straits. And Secretary Strickland has been very honest with us about this. When they get any money flowing from FEMA and DHS to them, in order for them to make payroll, will they need to pull from that prior to obligating to us?
Correct.
And my inclination would be that's probably what they should be doing to stabilize the
Right.
emergency management
Right.
that we all rely on.
Yeah. I mean, if you were in Russ's
Right.
position, you would do that.
And even in my position, knowing how
Right.
much we rely on the state, I support that
Right.
with the hope that eventually it
Works
gets straightened
out.
out, yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. I really
Of course.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
All right, not seeing any other questions, the joint committees will recommend this to the full council without objection. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much,
very
and really, thank you for all that information. And please keep us
Absolutely.
in the loop
I
on this.
promise to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a feeling we'll see you in between the 5 years. That's
Yes.
just a prediction. I'm sorry, yeah.
All right, the next two items, I believe we can, and thank you, Ms. Cummings, for your work on this. We can take together. One is the resolution to approve amendment to the FY 25-30 Capital Improvements Program and Supplemental Appropriation 25-51 to the FY 25 capital budget, Montgomery County Government, Department of Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions, the Dickerson Radio Tower, for the amount of $1.8 million in GO bonds. And the related item to this is the FY 26 capital budget amendments, the FY 25-30 CIP Police. I'll turn it over. We have both Ms. Farag and Dr. Torregas with us this morning. And I don't know who's going first, but I'll turn to Ms. Farag then.
Great. Good morning, everyone. The Dickerson radio tower is currently on private property on top of a smokestack, and there's a shelter. The tower shelter is built next to it. The owner of that private property has indicated that they want the tower removed, and you talked about this in much more length last year. But what's happened since then is that the lease has expired on the current private property, and the county has moved month to month. They have found a new location for the Dickerson radio tower, which is on county property up off of Ash Road. So the recommended supplemental appropriation adds $1.8 million to the project in this year, FY 25, and the reason for that is to now move that tower and the existing shelter up to county property. Because of the expedited need to move it quickly, I believe they have 18 months to do so, according to the private property owner. And the fact that there's a lot of market volatility and the cost of materials and that thing, the total cost now is going to be $3.8 million for the project. The supplemental appropriation and the amendment to the project just reflect the additional expenditures in FY25. My questions concerned whether or not the month-to-month lease would be sufficient in case there needed to be, move it more quickly based on what the property owner wants. However, this 12-tower architecture for the public safety radio system is self-healing, and they can use other towers in the case of an emergency. Fire and police also have sufficient backfill, I guess you could say, with different types of radios and their mobile computers, and Jerry Adcock can talk more about that if necessary. But so those were my two concerns, was the month-to-month lease, whether or not sufficient, and the need to use other architecture if this tower fails. Those seem to be in place, those backups seem to be in place, and I'm recommending approval as submitted by the executive.
Great. Dr. Torres, do you have anything to add at this point? All right, then we'll turn it over to Tibbs, and if you have anything to add to what Ms. Frog said. All right. Do you want to address any of the concerns she's raised? Or?
Well, Mike Knopfel, I'm the manager of the public safety group, and I think Susan covered all the elements very well. We have been asked to move off the Dickerson smokestack as quickly as possible. I have spoken to DGS, David Dice, and his staff. They do not see any issue with us continuing a month-to-month. They're in communications with a new property owner. But they do want us off that stack in the June timeframe of 2026 calendar year. So we are having a baby in 6 months here. So we're
Good way to say it.
moving straight ahead, So, but to cover that, as Susan mentioned, and Jerry can go into a deeper dive if we wanted to, we have NCR resources that we could bring to the site. There are cellular or cellular towers that we can erect. It won't give us a full capability of a brand new tower, but it gives us enough capability in that area to cover any type of voice communications that happen. So we're using an existing contract with a proven vendor. They delivered numerous towers in the county before. This is basically an exercise of constructing a new tower at a different site. And again, the increase in costs are really a different set of assumptions from the original cost estimate. And so that's where we're at. So.
Great. Terrific. Anything from OMB?
Seamus McNamara, OMB, and no, we fully support TEBS on this.
Co-chair Katz?
Thank you. The only question I have is, and Jerry is sitting here, but the new spot, when you finally get to the new spot, will there be dead spots with that? Do you have to be concerned about any of that?
No, Jerry Adcock with TEBS. No, it will not be having a dead spot issue because we're not moving it that far from the current smokestack.
Okay.
So it's really just relocating a little bit. In fact, they said with the microwaves, which is our backhaul antenna system, we'll have no issues with that in reacquiring signals once they put it back up on the air.
Thank you, and thank you all very much for what you do.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, not seeing any. Then we will recommend to the full council without objection the resolution to approve the amendment and the amendment to the capital improvement budget. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you for coming. Thank you, gentlemen. Those are all the items we have on our joint committee session today, so we are adjourned. Thank you all.